All right, welcome back to North Carolina Plumbing Code class. So last class we talked about Chapter 4, fixtures, faucets, and fixture fittings. So what you ought to be doing is just kind of going back through, reviewing some of the information that's found in some of the previous chapters that we've gone over. We've talked about Chapter 2 with definitions and a few of the things that we found in there, how to measure developed length, the different pipe sizes. We talked about where the junction of building sewer and building drain were, junction of the water service and water distribution, and what those things were. Um, so all sorts of different definitions that we covered in there between access and ready access. What's the difference of those? Then we went into chapter 3 with general regulations and just some of that general information. We talked about testing and inspection. We talked about a pipe hanger or pipe support chart as far as how often, what's the maximum distance you can put between pipe hangers. We talked about protection of the pipes, both protection from physical damage, saying if they're going to hang drywall and to keep one of those drywall screws from running into one of your water pipes or drain pipes, what do you do about that? Also to freeze protection. If you're burying a water line in the ground, how deep does it need to be installed? So all those things were in chapter 3. Um, Trench excavating, backfilling, that sort of stuff. Then, like I said, for the fixtures, faucets, and fixture fittings, and you should have just taken a quiz on that. So everybody's hopefully is up to speed on what's in chapter 4. Chapter 5 that we're getting into today talks about water heaters. Water heaters. Now we throughout the course of your time in here, you're going to have installed plenty of water heaters. And at the time as we go over and are installing those water heaters, I'll grill you on this information here that's found in chapter 5 to make sure that you know what you're doing with them. Okay, so this is on page 37. Now this one is going to be a little bit shorter lesson because it only goes from page 37 to just a little bit on page 40. So it should be a little bit quicker. Once again, even though it's a shorter one, I'm not going to read all of this to you. I'm going to let you fill in the blanks and just kind of read some of this that I don't cover on your own. Okay, page 37, water heaters, chapter 5. The scope of this chapter, it says the provisions of this chapter shall govern the material design and installation of water heaters and the related safety devices and appurtenances. And then it goes into cover as far as a water heater as a space heater. You can read that. The drain valves. It says, let's see. It says location. Water heaters and storage tanks shall be located and connected as to provide access for observation, maintenance, service, and replacement. So it says access. Now, does that mean, because I know if you get a double wide or something, sometimes those might be they might have like a panel that you have to remove and open up, and that water heater might be sitting back kind of in a place in a closet or back in the wall somewhere that had a panel up in front of it. And you say, wait a second, was that considered accessible? And yes, it would, because access means that might have to first remove a panel to get to it. Now, ready access, it would have to be right out in the open, but being accessible, you just got to be able to get to it. Let's see. It says a water heater should be labeled by a third party certified. Now, here we're starting to get into some information and some things that I'll quiz you on. The water temperature control and piping from tankless heaters. The temperature of water from tankless water heaters shall not be greater than 140 degrees Fahrenheit, where it's intended for domestic use. Okay, so 140 degrees where intended for domestic use is the maximum water temperature should be coming from those. Pressure marking of storage tanks. I'll let you read that. The temperature controls. Once again, hot water supply systems should be equipped with automatic temperature controls capable of adjustments from the lowest to the highest acceptable temperature settings for the intended temperature operating range. In a water heating system where temperatures exceed 140 degrees, a means such as an approved mixing valve shall be installed to temper the water for domestic use. So it says if it's the hottest water coming out of there for domestic use ought to be 140 degrees. And if you've got a heat source that is heating it up above 140 degrees, you ought to have some means of being able to cool that down. With the class, we actually did some flat panel roof mount solar panels on the roof. And so we had a larger storage tank, and it had a circulating pump that was just sitting there and running and keeping and letting the sun do a lot of the heating for us. We elevated that the water temperature, and we got that right on up there. And then we took that water from the tank and put it into a 80-gallon water heater. Now that was used as a backup, but we put the hotter water in there than what we needed to use. So on the outlet, we put a mixing valve, and it had a cold water line that ran into the side of that mixing valve. And so as the water went out and your people inside the house were using hot water, it was mixing cold water with it to bring that water temperature back down. We actually adjusted that back down to a temperature of 120 degrees. You'll see when we go on that it'll say us as installers should not install it higher than 120 degrees. But maximum temperature coming out of there, 140 degrees, or you need to have some type of mixing valve. Okay. Safety features of hot water heaters. And I'll let you kind of go over that. But they do say the thermostat, as far as on the right-hand side, about right column, halfway down, it says the thermostat of any new residential water heater offered for sale or lease for use in a single family or multi-family dwelling in the state shall be preset by the manufacturer or installer no higher than approximately 120 degrees. There that it says. So as they send that water heater out, they as the installer shouldn't have it preset for higher than 120 degrees. Us as the installer, we shouldn't be messing with the thermostats on those to adjust them higher than 120 degrees. But it does go on to say, for purpose of the section, a water heater shall be the primary source of, let's see, go ahead on down to B. It says nothing in this section shall prohibit the occupant of a single family or multi-unit residential dwelling with an individual water heater from resetting or having reset the thermostat on the water heater. Any such resetting shall relieve the manufacturer or the installer of the water heater. Okay, so basically it's removing us from liability. As soon as they touch that thermostat and they start to mess with that, it removes the liability off of us. So, you could mention to the homeowner, if they're just saying, hey, really jack that thing up there for me. I really want some hot water. Just be cautious. Us as an installer, we should not turn that thermostat up. If somebody gets burned and it was us, we could be liable. If they're the ones that do it, now they're taking on that liability. Okay. All right. Installation. Flip over to page 38. The installation of the water heater. Let's see. Water heaters shall be installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions, and it does have an instruction booklet that goes with the heater, and that instruction booklet needs to stay with the water heater. When we call it in for the inspection, the inspector wants to see the installation as that manufacturer's booklet with the water heater. Were turned down on one of our finals because we had a student was like, hey man, that you saw the booklet and thought, well, I'd like to flip through this on one of the tankless styles on-demand water heaters that we put in. So they took it, and as they were going through it, and we didn't realize, we called it in for inspection. The inspector said, hey, it's missing the book. And, we need to have a booklet with there in order for me to get you passed. So leave that there with it. And so it's for us to install it and for the inspector to check you that it was installed according to manufacturer specifications. Let's see, it's dealing with electric and gas-fired water heaters. Elevation and protection. Elevation of water heater ignition sources and mechanical damage protection requirements are in your mechanical code. So basically what that says, though, is if you have a water heater in a garage, the ignition source of the water heater needs to be elevated 18 inches above that garage floor. Maybe you've got, and just say, well, if this is just going to be used as shop down here, but if it's got a garage roll-up door to where a vehicle could be pulled in, they're going to want to see that is elevated to where the ignition source is at least 18 inches off the floor. Any any fumes that you have, some gas fumes, vapors, and stuff like that, those are going to settle down to the floor. If you've got a flame or some type of ignition source, even on the, they're saying even on the electric, that you've got some electric spark that could be happening there. If it did, we just do not want to ignite some flammable vapors, cause any type of fire or explosion. So that's what that talks about in protecting. Okay. Can't use them in not liquid or fuel gas shall not be installed in a room containing air handling machinery where such room is used as a plenum. So like as part of an air system, the duct where it's taking the return air and then blowing it through the building. If you did have some type of leak or something, carbon monoxide being given off, you don't want to sit there and blow that and spread that throughout the building. Okay, can you put a water heater in an attic? Yes, you can. 502.3. But they're going to have, let's see, but it gives you some restrictions. It says that you have to have unobstructed passageways large enough to allow for removal of the water heater. So you got to be able to get the water heater in and out. The passageway should not be less than 30 inches in height, 22 inches in width, and not more than 20 feet in length. Now you say, well, wait a second. I mean, is that, how firm is that? I mean, do we have to have that? Well, or can it not be over 20 feet? Then it goes on to say, though, if 6 feet of headroom is provided along the center line of the passageway from the opening to the water heater, the length of the passageway is permitted to exceed 20 foot. So if you can stand up, boy, you would not want to be dragging a new one in and a new one out, having to be all crunched over. But if you've got 6 foot of headroom and you can stand up and do it, they say, yes, you can, and got good floor path laid down, then you can go over 20 feet. Okay. It shall have continuous solid flooring, not less than 24 inches wide, a level service space, not less than 30 inches in length and 30 inches in width, shall be present at the front or the service side of the water heater. Give yourself a little bit more room to work in front of that water heater. Okay. The clear access opening dimensions shall not be less than 20 inches by 30 inches where such dimensions are large enough to allow removal of the water heater. So can you put them in the attic? Yes, you can. But just make sure that you come here to chapter 5 and look at all these, the dimensions. How big of hutch space do I need? How much headroom do I need? How much solid flooring do you need I put down? And then right around the water heater itself, how much room, floor space do I need to build and create here? Okay. Ultimately, the plumbing inspector is going to hold you accountable for that, even though you're going to say, "Oh, that was the builder who was building all that." Well, you better make sure that the builder did meet these requirements when you go to call that inspection in. Okay. Let's see. 502.6. Can you install a water heater in a crawl space? And we did. We've got some water heaters put in crawl spaces. But it says underfloor spaces containing appliances requiring access should be provided with an access opening, unobstructed passageway. Well, once again, just like it's going to read a lot like putting it in the attic. It says, yes, you can put it there, but you got to be able to get the water heater in and out. I've had some to where I think the house was built on top of the water heater. They put it under there and then built it because we could, like this water heater is way bigger than this crawl space door. There's no way. Even when the door was out and it was just rough masonry opening, it would not fit in and out. So, but now there's a code that says, hey, you've got to be able to get it in and out, and it's got all the dimensions there to it. So check all those dimensions out to say, can you put one in there? Let's see. Continue on down. Crawl space supports. Here, exterior. Let's go up to 502.7.1. Exterior grade installations. Equipment and appliances installed above grade level should be supported on a solid base or approved material a minimum of 2 inches thick. You got to put them on a base, at least solid base, 2 inches thick. It also goes down to crawl space supports. The support shall be a minimum of 2 inches thick, solid base. 2-inch thick formed concrete or stacked masonry units held in place by mortar and other approved materials. Methods. So now you'll see a lot of times it's stacked up on bricks, but they're just bricked it up along the outside edge. That really doesn't meet the code. The code says if you're going to stack it with bricks, you got to hold them and you got to mortar them all together to make a 2-inch, at least a 2-inch thick solid base. So one thing you could do is form you up a little pad and then just pour some concrete. The last one I did, I used a heating and air pad. For one of them that already had a preformed, that's got at least a 2-inch thick base that was solid, slid it under there and put that under there. The drainage. Below grade installations shall be provided with a natural drain or automatic lift or sump pump to be able to, if something leaks, that's be able to get it out. Okay. Prohibited installations, 502.8. Water heaters using solid, liquid, or fuel gas, with the exception of those having direct vent systems, shall not be installed in bathrooms and bedrooms or in a closet with access only through a bedroom or bathroom. However, water heaters of the automatic storage type may be installed as a replacement in a bathroom when approved by the plumbing official, provided they are vented and supplied with adequate combustion air. Here's your exception. When a closet having a weather-stripped solid door with an approved closing device has been designed exclusively for the water heater and where all air for combustion and ventilation is supplied from outdoors. So if you have like a little automatic door opener that will continually pull that door shut, and it has weather stripping around it, and it pulls the air from the outside in to use, and then vents the exhaust outside, then that would be approved. Also, another thing that you would need on that is, let's see if they say in here, you do have to have a carbon monoxide detector, would have to be also in there as well. Let's see, I would have thought that we'll check and see if that comes down into safety devices. Let's see, cold water line valve connection. How do you connect the water heater? 503.1. You've got to provide a valve within 3 feet of the water heater on the cold water line. That's 503.1. Okay. Let's see. Go down to, you can read about water circulation. Go on down to section 504, safety devices. 504.1, anti-siphon devices. An approved means such as a cold water dip tube with a hole at the top or a vacuum relief valve installed in the cold water supply line above the top of the heater or tank shall be provided to prevent siphoning of any storage water heater or tank. It also goes to say 504.2, vacuum relief valve, bottom-fed water heaters and bottom-fed tanks connected to water heaters shall have a vacuum relief valve installed. Okay, let me draw you a little picture. In the classroom, I've got a cutaway of one as well so that you can look inside of there and see these. Here's your water heater. What you've been putting in has got these nipples up on top, 3/4 inch threaded nipples, male nipples coming up. You got a hot side, you got a cold side. And this is it's a top fed water heater, meaning we take a cold water line and stick it and attach it to the cold here. We just read that you got to have a shut off valve within 3 foot of the water heater. Within 3 feet, you've got a shut off there. But the cold just dump in the top. It's got a tube that attaches this that you can't see. And it runs you right down close to the bottom of the tank. Now, when it says that tube is called a dip tube, it's a non-metallic, it's a plastic material dip tube. And in the top part of that, there's a little hole. That's all it is. There's a little hole. And that hole is there on purpose. That is your anti-siphon device. Meaning that if water started to go and we were to cut into this line, let's just say this line went over and went down and under like this. If we disconnect this line here and the water started to flow out here and it was lower than our water heater, we could create a situation where water fill up the tube. We're creating a siphon. We cut it, water started to drain, and as it drains, it starts to pull water in because this part is higher than where we cut. Now, as the water level gets lower, as soon as the water level gets below the hole in that tube, all of a sudden, instead of sucking water up the tube, it's going to allow air to draw into here, and it will stop the siphon. That is called a dip tube. And there is your anti-siphon device. And I guess that's how they call it. Is that how you spell it? Anti-siphon. Okay. Oh, it also did mention, while I'm still drawing pictures, this is a bottom-fed water heater. So now this one, it's a bottom feed heater, so it doesn't have a dip tube in it. Hot goes out the top. It's got a nipple down there on the bottom where we connect to. So you could take your a water line and do it. Now, what's easy is if this is up in the house, a lot of them that I've seen installed, the water line, since they're underneath in the crawl space or whatever, and they just pop the water line up and go right into the side. See, because that's the path of just so quick and easy right there. Okay, but this code says no, we cannot do that. You have to install a vacuum breaker. When installing a vacuum breaker in here, as you get into chapter 6, it'll tell you to install a vacuum breaker on a device like this. You've got to run up. It's got to be at least 6 inches higher than the top of your device. So we're going to go up six inches. We're going to put a T in the line, install a vacuum breaker. Put a vacuum breaker in the line, run this line back down, and now install to the side of the heater. Little extra piping that you need with a vacuum breaker up on there, at least 6 inches above on that to make that legal for a bottom-fed water heater. Okay. Shutdown. A means for disconnecting an electrical hot water supply system from its energy supply should be provided in accordance with the NFPA 70. Separate valves should be provided to shut off the energy fuel supply to all other types of hot water supply systems. You have to have a relief valve. Storage water heaters operating above atmospheric pressure should be provided with an approved self-closing levered pressure relief valve and temperature relief valve or combination thereof. Okay, let's draw our pictures a little bit more. It says, okay, we're going to have a relief valve on this thing. It's located within the top 6 inches of the tank. So you might see this installed up here. Okay. Might look something like that, and that threads into the tank. It's got a little lever on it. You might see it. There's one place you might see it. Another place that you might see it is coming right off the side. Threads in there, little lever on it. Okay. This is called the T and P valve. Okay. T's for temperature. Temperature. Boy, I can't even. My spelling is horrible. ER, yeah. T, temperature, and pressure. Relief. T and P valve, temperature and pressure relief valve. So it also will say, as you start to go down through there, that the temperature can't be set is not higher than 210 degrees Fahrenheit, and the pressure of 150 psi on that thing for the temperature and pressure relief valve. Go some more safety devices. Okay, installing it. It says that it's installed within the top 6 inches of the tank. And then also it gives you down in 504.6 requirements for the discharge piping. Okay. Taking the discharge piping. Remember, when we install these, we don't leave that just like that. If you were to be standing beside one when it blew, you could have a 210-degree water just blast you right there. So we have to put a discharge pipe on. And you could read all those. There's 14 different things, even though 7 has been deleted. But you got 14 of them that are saying as far as where is that allowed to be discharged to, how to run this. Now, a lot of ours, we've been installing them in little rooms on the backside of these habitat homes. And so we're over onto concrete where no damage is going to be done. We don't need to put a pan under it so that this can discharge right onto that concrete floor. Now, what we've gone over, and as you read and look at this, you'll notice that this has this gap here down here is going to be between a minimum of 2 times the pipe size, which is going to be, this was a 3/4 pipe for us that we're running. So that's going to be like 1.5 inches. And then the maximum of 6 inches on that. Okay. Where that gap was. Look at that stuff. Some of the things. Can you take that if we were to have it up in the house? Can we just discharge that down into the crawl space and say, hey, well, if it leaks, it'll just leak down to the crawl space? Is that allowable? Look at some of those things as far as what can you do? Where if we can't, we got to discharge it out to the side of the house. Can I just go anywhere outside of the house? Is there some different measurements off the ground, minimums and maximums to that? So read all that, look at it, check it out. If you got any questions on it, let me know. Okay. And then it talks about 504.7, a required pan. When do you have to put a pan on these things? Where a storage tank type water heater or a hot water storage tank is installed in remote locations, such as a suspended ceiling, there's one, attics, got to put a pan, above occupied spaces, a second floor level up, got to put a pan under it. You want that thing to leak and then do damage down to the ceiling and floor below. Unventilated crawl spaces. That gets us, if we put one in a crawl space of a habitat home, they've been doing unventilated crawl spaces. They've been insulating the exterior walls, no vents in there, lining plastic from the floor and leaving the insulation between the floors out, conditioning that crawl space. Well, that's doing it and being an unventilated crawl space. We have to pay in that water heater. Okay. So if this was in the crawl space, what we did is we will put a 2-inch solid base. Let's just say that's our base here. We put a base on it. Since we're in the crawl space, we got to put a pan under it. We got this panned off. So the whole thing's sitting in a pan. The pan has a drain on here. That pan drain has got to be, sometimes you'll see them with PVC drain fitting adapters. You can't use those. It's got to be able to handle the hot water. So if you see one and you buy one that's got a PVC, if it's going to be inspected, you got to toss that thing away and buy at least a CPVC, chlorinated polyvinyl chloride. It's allowed to handle hot water, something that's made for it. And then we run that and we can discharge that off. So we can take our TMP valve, discharge it into the pan, and then the pan drain can handle it from there. Now, what I like to do on the crawls, these here, instead of taking it to the outside, just said, well, wait a second. I can install this, the whole crawl space. If there's the foundation wall, the whole crawl space has a low point drain going through that foundation wall. So I'm just going to let that thing discharge right over there to the into the floor of the crawl, which is got right by the low point drain. So it can all that, if it does leak, that water's going to just run out of the crawl space. So, and that is acceptable. Okay. Let's say, or in any place where if it leaks, it's going to do some damage. Okay. You can have A galvanized steel or aluminum pan having a material thickness of not less than, and it gives you the thickness, number 24 gauge for steel, and number 26 gauge for aluminum, or other pans approved for such use. Just depending on the type that you could use. Some plastic. Electric water heaters may rest in a high impact plastic pan of at least 1/16 inch thickness. Water heaters mounted on concrete floor with a floor drain is some exceptions, okay? The pan size, this is what we're talking about right here, the pan size and the drain. The pan itself. It says the pan shall not be less than 1.5 inches deep and shall be of sufficient size and shape to receive all dripping of condensation, anything from within the tank. So get that pan just a little bit big, make sure that it can handle if anything's off. We don't want to have a fitting hanging out over the side of the pan. Okay, all fittings, anything else that might be leaking around this water heater is going to drip into the pan. Okay, the pan shall not be obstructed by the appliance. The pan should be drained by an indirect waste pipe. Here's the pipe, having a diameter of not less than 1 inch in diameter. So the smallest size drain, water heater drain for the pan is 1 inch in size. Piping for safety pans shall be of those materials listed in table 605.4. Now, 605.4 is not that far away. Chapter 6 is what's next, water supply and distribution. If you flipped over 605.4 on page 45, and this is what I mentioned to you, if you look at that chart, you do not see PVC listed in that chart. It has to be of one of these approved materials in order to be a material that you can use for that pan drain. Okay, that's on page 45. So take the time to flip over and look at the chart. If it tells you to go refer to another area, it says where a pan drain was not previously installed, a pan drain shall not be required for a replacement water heater installation. So that's kind of funny. But it does save us a lot of extra work. If they've got one upstairs in a house somewhere and there was not a pan on it, and then you're like, oh my goodness. Now all the wall, everything at this point is all sealed up. There's drywall up. And how in the world am I going to get a pan drain out on this thing without just totally ripping up the walls and everything else to try to get a drain to flow by gravity to the outside? So it says, hey, if they didn't have one before, we're not going to require you to put one in now. Okay. The pan drain termination, 504.7.2. The pan drain shall extend full size and terminate over suitably located indirect waste receptor or floor drain, or extend to the exterior of the building and terminate not less than 6 inches above and not more than 24 inches above the adjacent ground surface. Where a pan drain was not previously installed, a pan drain shall not be required for replacement water heater installation. So once again, they didn't have a pan on it before. Nah, you don't have to put a pan. Oh, well, they had a pan underneath it, but didn't put a pan drain. Well, where they didn't have the pan drain, you don't have to put a pan drain. But let's see. But if we do install it and it's new and we can get and it says we're supposed to put a pan on it and get this drain out, then that's what we need to do. It gives you some locations. It says that this can just discharge into let's just say you were putting one in and the room had a floor drain. Okay, and that went down and had a trap underneath it. This is the floor. And you had a floor drain here. You could just pan it over onto the floor and let it discharge onto the floor and it'll run into that floor drain. That's fine. Go into a floor drain. Maybe you've got this. It might be suspended. Let's just say the little water heater is suspended over a janitor's closet area. Okay. Let me erase some of this and make a little different picture. It says you could also put it to a waste receptor. The one thing we can't do is we can't just plumb it in and tie it in directly. It's got to tie in indirectly. But maybe they've got a little room. It's got a janitor's closet here. Maybe you got a kind of a wash sink. Okay. You might have a mop sink down over here. Underneath that would have a floor drain and stuff like that. There's your floor. So you've got something with a wall faucet on it. Okay. So you might have a mop sink, a little janitor's closet or something like that. And then if there was some framing, or they could suspend it also and support this thing, there could be a little water heater if they've got access. They just got to have access up to it. You might have a little water heater up there somewhere. What we could do is put a pan underneath that thing, pipe it down. This pan could come down and could pop out the wall. Okay, now you wouldn't want it right over your faucet probably, but or you could do it over to this side, or you could pipe it over and down and pop it over here and let it discharge into the mop sink. But it could discharge into one of these sinks if you wanted to have it to do that. That's a location. Another possible location is, this was exterior. If you came down and went through, let's just say that's the outside wall, it comes down and it discharges. You don't want to let it discharge horizontal. Turn it off vertical. And that was this gap here between the end of this pipe and the ground. Okay, was the minimum was 6 inches, and the max was what? 24, right? Between 6 and 24 inches. And let me just, yes, that is correct. Between 6 inches and 24 inches is what you got to have that thing discharge off at. Okay. There you go. That was for chapter 5. So let's take a look at some of your questions on your quiz. It's going to be a 10-question true or false quiz. So when you go over to the blackboard under your assignments, click on this one. This is what you can expect. Question number 1. The maximum temperature allowed from a tankless water heater for when intended for domestic use is 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Was that true or false? 120 degrees. Maximum temperature allowed from the tankless water heater when intended for domestic use is 120 degrees. Now, I'm not asking what is that's what we can set them at as an installer. That's 120. But was the maximum temperature allowed from it, was that 120? Go back, if you have questions on it, kind of go back right to one of the first things that we talked about on the in the lesson. Okay. Number 2, a bottom-fed water heater will need a vacuum relief valve installed. If you remember the picture that I had up before this one, I had it there and said when the water goes in the bottom of that heater, if you can picture that water heater here, when we went in the bottom, did we have to go up and install a vacuum relief? It says bottom-fed water heaters will need a vacuum relief valve installed. Is that true or false? Question 3. Water having an ignition source shall be elevated such that the ignition source is not less than 6 inches above the garage floor. This one you will not find in your book, so I'll make sure that, but if you remember, go back through the video lesson and look, I told you the ignition source has to be at least 18 inches above the garage floor. Okay. So in this one, I said 6 inches. So no, that would be a false statement. Question 4. A gas water heater without a direct vent system cannot be installed in a bedroom. A gas water heater without a direct vent cannot be installed in a bedroom. That direct vent system, I mean, it's pulling air for the outside and putting exhaust, the fumes back out. So it says, can you just take a regular gas water heater and install it in your bedroom that does not have that direct vent system in pulling the air from the outside in and exhausting the exhaust out to the outside? Well, I don't think you'd want to do that. You might not wake up in the morning. Question 5. A water heater cannot be installed in an attic. A water heater cannot be installed in an attic. Is that a true or false statement? Number 6. A pan drain that drains to the outside must terminate at least 6 inches above the ground. A pan drain that terminates to the outside must be at least 6 inches above the ground. Is that true or false? There it is. And number 7, a water heater pan must be at least 2 inches deep. Now, I'm not asking for the base that the water heater sits on. Then we said that has to be at least 2 inches, but we said the pan for the water heater has to be at least 2 inches deep. Was that true or is that false? Or was it something else? Or was it an inch and a half, maybe? I believe that's what we said. So 2 inches would be false. Question number 8. A 1-inch pipe is the minimum size pipe that can be used to drain the pan. Got the pan, the drain coming off. Was that a minimum of a 1-inch pipe? Yes, it was. Question 9. The relief valve on a water heater should not be set for a temperature above 140 degrees. Is that true or false? The relief valve on the water heater, if you've pictured that water heater I drew, I even wrote the temperature and pressure of that relief valve. Said it should not be set for above 140 degrees. Is that the temperature that I said on that? Okay, go. If you don't know, go back and look that up or watch it on the video. Question 10. The temperature relief valve is installed within the top 6 inches of the tank. Is that true or false? I didn't stay on it long, but I did mention that. I said that it could come. You'll notice I said you'll see that TMP valve come off the top, be it right off the top that you might see it there, or you might see it off the side. And then I said, but however you're going to see it, it's going to be within the top. How many inches of the tank? And 6 inches was the correct answer on that. So, all right. Well, I think that was got you for a good review for your quiz. I hope everybody's taking the time to watch these video lessons and getting good grades on your quizzes. If you have any questions or anything as you continue to just finish reading over that material and looking, feel free to reach out to me. That's what I'm here for, is to help you out all that I can. So I look forward to seeing you next time as we get into Chapter 6 with the water supply and distribution. But until then, have a great day.